Hi everyone. I was thinking about Doreen Virtue today. She just popped in. For those of you that don't know who she is, she used to be a kind of new agey, for lack of a better word, type of guru woman. Many decades, connected to Louise Hay. What are some of the other authors? There's multiple authors from the Hay House Publishing kind of group of people. So she was very connected to that for many decades. And actually, I had read, a lot of her books. She used to do some really lovely um, sort of chakra meditations, angel meditations. They were really quite beautiful, actually. Very powerful. I remember listening to those, gosh, like, over 20 years ago. And really found a lot of value in them, actually. The reason I bring her up is because, first of all, she came into my mind today, and I have been curious about her um, transformative journey, which is that for decades and decades, she published books and publicly spoke and recorded audios. I guess, for lack of a better word, from a very alternate level, new age or holistic way. I don't know how you want to define it exactly. I think she terms it as new age. I hate that term because it really it just puts a bit of a negative kind of stigma on things, I think. I like to think of things a bit more broadly. I think anyway, at the time she had really good things to say and share, and I've personally felt at the time that her influence was very positive. But what's happened to her, it happened in 2017. So anyway, this is her natal chart. We're not going to go into the analysis of her natal chart, but what we'll look at very quickly is this. I think this is just really fascinating. So basically, the date you see here is the 1st of Feb 2017. And that was the month and year that she publicly announced she's now a Christian, as in a full blown, born again, I've got the Holy Spirit type of Christian. Everything else is false. This path is the correct path, right? It's that sort of very fanatical level. And she has lost a very big following as a result of that. And I'm not here to judge her at all. It's her business. It's her soul's business, what she does. I'm just fascinated at the astrology. So the time that was given was 1 a.m. And even if we just stick with that time, which I suspect her time will go back, more than likely. Could go back 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. We don't know unless her chart was rectified. But in most cases, a person's time of birth goes back. So, look, I mean, the most obvious and striking features, you've probably already spotted quite a few of them, but I just want to also just point to the ones that I think are very important. The first one, of course, is Pluto, hands down, no question about it, which is what I've got on my ascendant on at the moment. And I guess that's why I really am thinking about this, relative to her. Because, for me, she wasn't just some person that I came across for 5 minutes. Like I literally, was following her for a while. And so I have a lot of memories of her and her work and the practices that I followed through her, specifically the chakra meditations and the angelic invocations and practices, because I've always been very into angelic invoking and meditations and things like that since I was teeny weeny little tiny little person. So Pluto on the ascendant is naturally, the most striking feature of this. And if her time was to go back, which I suspect it will, but even if it doesn't, Pluto is, absolutely conjunct her ascendant. But if her time went back, even just 10 minutes, Pluto would be, exactly to the degree conjunct her ascendant. Either way, it's there on the ascendant. And obviously, for every single person, that's a very unique and personal journey. And for her, clearly, it was a complete and utter shift and transformation of who she is as a whole person. Because in this transition she has made, she has she has demonized her past, unfortunately. That's the only sort of thing that I find a little bit sad about this story. And she's also demonizing every single person that she walked that path with, very publicly. Again, that's her business, what she does. But people like Gary Zukav, who's written one of my favorite books called The Seed of the Soul, he's a Pisces. He is gentle, the most gentle little Yoda type of figure, the most gentle, loving soul. If you see him speak, there's barely any personality or ego there. He's just all soul. And he really just primarily speaks about love and compassion and forgiveness and, understanding the personality desires and the ego desires and understanding the soul and perhaps the conflicts that arise within that experience for all of us, in different ways at different times and so forth. Anyway, the point being, he's a very gentle soul and he's far from demonic, in my opinion. And I thought, well, let me have a quick look and see if she's released a video recently, because I knew she'd made this transition into Christianity back in 2017. And I never bothered to really look at what she was delivering, subsequently. And I just looked at her YouTube channel today, and it's all Christian stuff, which there's nothing wrong with that because I identify as a Christian myself, to be honest. I don't identify as a Christian in a way where I would, sort of suggest that other people's beliefs are wrong or bad or anything like that. But I guess I just hold my own personal beliefs around Christ consciousness, which Doreen, that is, she says that even that term is demonic. To say, such a thing as Christ consciousness, it's the devil coming in trying to deceive you, just things like that. And she goes on and on and on about that kind of stuff. Now, I've got a personal family member who's very much like that, has been like that for decades, and still is like that. And, I love that person very, very much, even though that person might be of the view that, uh, people who study astrology or who teach astrology or, look at the sky, the stars, etc., um, going to hell, right? And the funny thing is that, the Bible, it doesn't say that at all. Now, for any of you Bible people, for lack of a better word, or, you know, um, people who just are devoted to Christ and to God and to the Holy Spirit, that's not a problem at all in any way, shape, or form. But I'd appreciate it if you don't come here and bash this presentation, because this is not a debate for, it's not an egoic debate to say that one stream is right and one stream is wrong. It's up to each person what they believe. So that this presentation has got nothing to do with that. But look at what else is going on here. So Pluto on the ascendant, that was her rebirth. And what a wonderful sort of synchronicity and description, rebirth, right? When uh, Christ was nailed to the cross, he was reborn, right? He transformed. So the symbolism, to Christ has so much to do with this process of death and rebirth that we encounter multiple times throughout our journey in life. But I think the story of Christ and Christianity, over the last couple of thousand years has been the most powerful story. There are others as well. There are other religions. Of course, I recognize and respect that. I'm just simply pointing to the power of the Christian story, for such a long time. Of course, during the age of Pisces, relative to the great cycle of life, or the great astrological cycle of life, which is approximately 25,000 years, and speaks to the different ages that we go through. For example, many people believe we're in the age of Aquarius already, but we are not. And, I've spoken to various individuals who understand astronomy, which is primary in these kinds of things, and who all more or less are on the same page that, the age of Aquarius, sorry to digress, the age of Aquarius is it's around about 300 years away. But we are in what's called a sub-period of Aquarius. So we're still in the Pisces age, but we're in the sub-period of Aquarius. And that's why we perhaps feel or are tuning into what's coming, the age of Aquarius. And of course, Pluto in Aquarius at the moment is just really tuning us into what's to come, essentially. But we haven't completed the Pisces age yet. And 300 years might sound like a long time, and I suppose it is, but it's all relative because, 2,000 years is much longer, right? And that's how long we've been in the Pisces age. So, anyway, Pluto on the ascendant is a very powerful symbol for a complete makeover of oneself. That can be in so many ways, that can be physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and all of the above. It just depends on the soul and what the soul is seeking to integrate at that time in their life. And if someone said to me, well, what are you trying to integrate, with Pluto and your ascendant at the moment? I don't have the answer to that yet because it's literally smack bang on my ascendant. I'm just in the absolute heart of it. I have glimpses and feelings and desires and visions, but I'm putting it all together through a process and a journey. It's not like you just make a decision and say, well, or one might, but for me, it doesn't feel like that. To me, it feels like a gradual process that will unfold over a period of time. And what I'm seeing, particularly with the X-ray vision factor, because that's what Pluto does on the ascendant, I'm seeing perhaps more clearly now than I ever have in my life, what habits and patterns and themes of things that I've lived and experienced, be it in this life or other lifetimes, that I'm really ready to move away from, at the highest level, at the truest level, at the most purest level. And that's, what I'm working on. Does that take one day? Fuck no, it takes a long time. But that's kind of like the energy that I recognize with Pluto on the ascendant. Now, for Doreen, it was the recognition that she decided that Christ came to her, Jesus came to her at that time, as she puts it, and saved her. As she puts it, I'm using her words. And that is a Pluto on the ascendant experience. Now, look at everything else that was going on. This is what blows me away because often when somebody has a big, and this is without going into secondary progressions, without going into primary directions, without looking at the Babylonian astrology. This is just looking at basic, real-time transits, which can sometimes just be so powerful and enough to kind of show you what's going on in the picture. So Pluto's on the ascendant. The South Node is approaching her Mars in Pisces. Chiron is conjunct her Venus in Pisces. She was having a Venus conjunct Venus moment, so that was a Venus return. She was also having a Jupiter return. I think those were and a Saturn return. Look at all the returns she was having in that month when she became a born again Christian, when she was saved from Satan. That's her experience. We can't deny her, her experience. That's her experience, right? Again, the only thing that I don't appreciate is, the demonizing of everybody else who's not following her path, more or less, because that's what's going on. Look, some people she's choosing to speak about, and I'm not going to say who, but some people she has highlighted, I have to agree, they do have this real darkness about them and a bit of a hidden, pardon me, kind of agenda. I actually am in agreement with her on that, but I don't think that that is the case with everybody she's speaking about. She's projecting this particular rebirth or new belief system that she is, adamant about. It's the only way, onto everything and everyone. And that's what's created division and war in this world, amongst other things like greed and power, of course. But, the whole thing of religious wars, that's been going on for a very long time. And that has many roots and layers. So I kind of preferred when, when she was just a lot more open, to be honest. But, it's not up to me to have any preference really at all. That's just who she was, and this is who she is now. I also feel that with her Saturn in Sagittarius, so that Saturn is basically in the 12th house. Okay, it looks like it's in the 11th, but it's actually in the 12th house. And the 12th house makes a lot more sense to me anyway. And if you take her time back, the Saturn drops deeper into the 12th house as well. See, the cusp is 25 and Saturn is 25. So it's a 12th house Saturn, whichever way you look at it. And even if you go to whole sign houses, that's going to be a Saturn in the 12th. So multiple systems will put Saturn in the 12th because that's just where it is. And I think it's pretty significant that Saturn is retrograde and in Sagittarius, and that she's got, Neptune conjunct the North Node conjunct Jupiter in the ninth house, the house of beliefs, religion, one's, cosmological orientation, faith, and the like. That's all ninth house. And, she's got a Jupiter North Node, Neptune triple conjunction there. So that's, clearly she was supposed to find her way through the exploration of spirituality in the various forms that she has explored it over the years. That's what she's doing. She's doing her North Node in Scorpio, But I think the Saturn in Sagittarius and retrograde in the 12th, I really feel that that's something, quite heavy that's sort of unfinished from the past. that again, I think she's had multiple lifetimes in this seeking path, and I think she's explored many different ways of experiencing soul and spirit and faith and belief and ancient scriptures and the like. I think she's done many turns and just have had a lot of different experiences. And I think with the Saturn in the 12th, she's sort of reliving some past life experiences, reliving some past life memories, and she's sort of trying to correct certain things in this particular lifetime, which is why Saturn is retrograde and Saturn is in Sagittarius and Saturn is in the 12th house. And it is very interesting that she had this sort of awakening and transition and rebirth at this is her second Saturn return here. And, the second Saturn return is a very sacred passage. I think it's more sacred than the first one, generally speaking, only because of our, life experience and wisdom and our level of desires and interests are much more different when we are close to 60 versus when we are 29 years of age. That's a no-brainer. So, yeah, I think something really big happened at this time. Clearly, the life situation reflects it. But I just think it's very much connected to that second Saturn return, being in Sagittarius and in the 12th house, which is, finishing something that was very important to her soul to finish. And it's such an intense experience and transition. And none of us know this better than her relative to her own personal experience. But I say that because she's got, Scorpio on the midheaven. And, the sign on the midheaven or planets on the midheaven are, it's the mission that God gave us, if you like, to explore and possibly achieve, in any given lifetime, whatever sign and placements are up there in the 10th. I'm talking now on a spiritual level versus on a more physical, mundane level of career and things like that. So someone like this individual, is it's obvious she was going to be drawn to this kind of path because of her natal placements anyway, Mars in Pisces, Venus in Pisces, Jupiter, North Node, Neptune in the ninth, Saturn in Sagittarius retrograde in the 12th. It's not very Sun in Taurus, any of the things she's sort of done from that very basic kind of level. But, look, her Sun is opposite Neptune, so that can be the life path of the eternal seeker of truth and God, source creation. That can be the mystic. That can be the misguided soul, really struggling to find their way. And I guess that's what she's identified, in the later part of her life. She feels, and this is not only Sun Neptune, but Jupiter Neptune conjunctions can be very tricky. It's a wonderful aspect, Jupiter Neptune at the highest possible level, of course, but at a more everyday level, it can feel like a very misguided experience in that we place our hope and faith into things that are not going to be what we thought they were. And I think that's what she's identified through her life journey. I'm sure in some way deep in her soul, I'm sure she really does value and appreciate a lot of the things she learnt and experienced along the way. Even though now at this point, unfortunately, she does demonize those things, sadly. But I think deep in her heart and soul, there would be some value and recognition in everything she taught, experienced, and went through. Because it ultimately did lead her, to where she is today. And it took Pluto to come to the ascendant to wake her up into a new life. And that new life, was chosen in the life path of, receiving the Holy Spirit, as it were, and following the path of Jesus Christ and understanding that symbol, that soul, that person, whatever you want to call him, the Son of God. It doesn't matter how you identify it or what labels you put. It's a very personal thing, but this is what I see happen to her, and I'm just astounded at the amount of sort of returns and, even the Jupiter return. What's a Jupiter return about? It's about our sense of faith and what the hell we believe in. you know, Fundamentally, yeah, it's about expansion and growth and, exploration and adventure and travel and, all those things for sure. But, her Jupiter is in the ninth house, and here she is having a Jupiter return, the time where she decides, yeah, well, actually, the last, 40, 50 years of my life, whatever it's been, I've decided that I'm going to walk away from that because I found the true path of truth and enlightenment, and I've been saved. That's what she believes. That's what she feels. And there it is, Jupiter on Jupiter, Saturn on Saturn, Pluto on the ascendant, Chiron on Venus. That's really interesting. I think the Chiron on the Venus, in fact, I'm pretty sure, would have led to the experience of her, which she probably hasn't spoken of this publicly. I mean, I don't know, maybe she has, but I doubt it. The Chiron on the Venus would have been the backlash and the rejection she would have subsequently received from so many people that were following her. Because I remember a few years ago when this happened, I remember so many people being so shocked at her transition, and a lot of people were very negative. They were bashing her. Then there were the Christians came on board and said, "Yay, you made it! You're saved now. Your soul's saved." So you always got these divisions. And I'm just very observant, of these sorts of events and situations. And I can sort of sit back and look at both, with a fair bit of objectivity, as opposed to getting, overly sort of triggered and saying, no, well, that's really fucked up, or that's bullshit, or, whatever, right? But in the context of this kind of life journey. Okay, let me just be clear on that, because there are other things that I would be have a very strong conviction about, such as torturing and killing people and burning them alive and raping them and things like that. I would have, a pretty strong opinion about those sorts of things. I'm not going to lie, but not for something like this. This is someone's personal journey, and I just find it really interesting. The other thing that I wanted to point out too, as well, is if you I took her time of birth back just 10 minutes, right? Just to show you what happens there. And what happens is Pluto is exactly on the ascendant here, right? Everything else pretty much remains the same. It's just the outside wheel that more or less changes, right? And I did notice, though, that if you take her time back with this house system, at least, let's say, Virgo then appears on the ninth house cusp, whereas before it was Libra. And I think what I find really interesting about that is this. Let me just show you. So Mercury is in the third house, and see how Mercury is stationary. So she's born just as Mercury stationed direct. So that's quite a powerful portal for Mercury. And so that says a lot about her mindset and her thinking and her beliefs and the different things that she was going to learn and experience with the all the different things that she's studied. And look, she's got a background in psychotherapy. She was a therapist, counselor as well. Perhaps that's why I was drawn to her too, because I've got that background as well. And subsequently, since she transitioned into Christianity, I think she's gone and gotten her master's in some type of Christian studies or something like that, I think. She's a highly intelligent, woman. She's no dummy, that's for sure. I think she's got, amazing insight and instincts on whatever platform she decides to speak through. And this is the other thing that I wanted to show you as well. Just keep in mind that Mercury is, it's at quite a prominent place, right? It's stationing direct essentially. So it's a very potent Mercury, loaded. And it's in the third house, the house of studying and learning. And she's done a lot of that in her life. And if we do use this time, Virgo's on the ninth house cusp. So Mercury rules her ninth house. And so she's been studying for decades, learning different things that, corresponds to what she's going to believe in, what she's going to preach and teach. And perhaps the Neptune on the midheaven, because when she was in the new age, for lack of a better word, stream of things, which was for decades until 2017, she was quite a glamorous looking woman, quite attractive, big blonde, long hair, always wore very Venusian type of clothes and big bright colors. And, she wasn't some little kind of hermit or some very basic kind of Jane next door type of woman. She was very glamorous, which is the Neptune on the midheaven, by the way. And she did do, as she claimed back then, psychic readings. Again, it's the Neptune, North Node, Jupiter, and particularly the Neptune, conjunct the midheaven. And I wonder if somebody asked her now, though, when you were, I'm almost certain I know what she's going to say, but I'm just thinking if somebody asked her, what do you think now about all the psychic readings you gave to people? Like, was that, were you lying? What the fuck was going on there? And she'll say, no, I wasn't lying. I'm speaking on her behalf, which I shouldn't. But just from hearing her speak of late, my guess is she will say, well, no, that was, that was a demon sort of misguiding me, as it were. I thought I was being honest and authentic, but it was a demon speaking through me. Because that's what she thinks of clairvoyance and psychic abilities now, sadly. So here's one other thing I just quickly want to point to. So these are called Fidario periods, and I've been working with this system for over 20 years. So I know it works. I know how it works, and I know the value in it. And so look at this. When she was gearing up into, 2017, well, 2 years before that, you could say, she went into a Mercury Fidario period. And, there's a lot of things we could say about this, but the thing that this highlights to me, quite obviously, is that, she went into a different stream of thinking. She changed her mind because it was like a complete change of one's mind in a big way though, because she changed her mind in what she believed in for decades and went from one extreme to the other, as it appears at least on the surface level and in that consensus state. Because if you go into deeper levels of Christianity and the alternate world, they work harmoniously together. There's no separation from them. There's a biblical quote, I've just forgotten exactly how it goes, but it's it is about the third eye, the pineal gland, but they don't use that terminology. There was different terminology that Christ used at the time. And I must find the quote and stick it under in the comments because I've just forgotten it. But it was literally about the third eye, pineal gland, the ability to see with your third eye. I think what a lot of people tend to either not understand or do not accept is that the Bible is full of symbols and metaphors. And I think the talent and the gift in the artistry of translating it is what's lacking in most people. And so, what is offered as an alternate is the mainstream consensus, conventional, straight out reading it as it sounds, and in a institution such as a church, and creating this sort of indoctrination and dogma out of it. That well, we all know what it's done. It's created guilt and shame and fear and suppression of the feminine. And I mean, look at all the priests that have been fucking predators. Why do you think that's happened? Anyway, okay, so I just found it interesting. She went into her Fidario period, which is, just around about the time where she changed her mind about everything she believed in, just did a total flip. And Mercury rules the ninth house. Of course, it has rulership over here on the fifth and sixth, and we'd need to ask her what the hell that means. We can only speculate because these areas of life are not really, they don't connect so much to the context of what we're discussing here today. But if we spoke to her, I bet she'd be able to, sort of express some things that we'd be able to say, oh yeah, okay, so that was about your son, fifth house. Oh, that was about health things that came up at that time, sixth house, right? You'd need to speak to a person to get these kind of answers. So, in any case, I think it's always really valuable to look at these sort of chart examples, which I do, and I have done many over the years. I haven't done this for a long time, only because I find it very difficult to manage my time. I've got Cancer on the sixth house cusp, and one thing about Cancer on the sixth house cusp, it's a feeling that you are losing time every single day. There's just not enough time to do anything. It's a really it's a really difficult thing, actually, Cancer, on the sixth house cusp, and that's what I've got. So I'm forever trying to catch up, on just anything and everything, my personal life, my astrological God's work, the goddess work, whatever. I'm always going to the gym, doing some yoga, having something to eat, sleeping, whatever. I feel like I'm always trying to chase time to do just all these things. I'm just very acutely aware of it, is what I'm saying. So there are some other famous charts that I'd like to bring through. One is of a famous artist that a friend of mine has asked me to have a look at and speak about. His name's Alexander, I think, from memory. Anyway, very famous artist, tragic ending and the like, but very interesting stuff astrologically. And God, there are countless other individuals that I would love to, just bring up their charts and look at these, especially when they've had, something huge happen in their life journey. It's the best way to learn the sky. And we are looking at tropical zodiac, which is just as valuable and speaks to everything just as powerfully as the Babylonian sidereal zodiac. That they are just different windows we are looking through. And if you are working with both systems, which is what I'm transitioning into, because it takes a really long time, Cancer on the sixth house cusp, that's what says that. it is a difficult thing to transition in our consciousness. Even my mentor slash, closest one of my closest friends on the planet, who I first started studying astrology with, when I talked to him about Babylonian astrology, and this guy, we're talking about a man who's been doing astrology for, coming up to 50 years, right? He's a master in technical astrology, rectification, and the like. That's who I learnt all this stuff from. But when I talk to him about Babylonian astrology, like his mind just can't switch into it, you know, not naturally anyway. And for me, it seems to be a little bit more natural. I'm not saying it's super easy for me, but I can do it. And sometimes it's, a lot more natural than other times. Just depends on what I'm looking at and so forth. Point being about that whole song and dance is that there's tremendous value and depth in multiple systems, and it wouldn't be right to disregard one over the other in terms of verbalizing and saying, well, no, that system just doesn't work. Well, sorry, but it does. Maybe you just don't know how to use the system. Maybe that's a possibility. Maybe you just don't know how to transition from one to the other. That's okay. Most people will just pick one anyway. There's very few people that will work with both tropical and Babylonian and be skilled at both. Very few people. So it's a difficult thing to do. Anyway, that's my wrap up for today. Let me know if you have heard of Doreen Virtue. I'm sure many of you have. Share your thoughts and comments. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are about what's going on with her, what happened, and you might have a similar story. Who knows? Love to hear it. Much love and take care.